From the talented mind of Nihei Tsutomu comes Tower Dungeon, a tale of sword and sorcery set inside a fantasy world very reminiscent of something you'd see right out of a Souls-like game. Now, while the art style might be less detailed than what we're used to when it comes to this author, the mysterious setting, ominous atmosphere, and clever use of environmental storytelling is something that makes this manga extremely special in my eyes, even if it only is 7 chapters long so far. It's a simple and fun premise done in an extremely interesting way, with that classic Tsutomu touch of colossal architecture always looming in the background. Now, while the main protagonist Yuva here may seem like the archetypical, clueless, strong guy character that we've seen in numerous other series, it's not really that big of an issue in this manga, as the brutality of the world makes his strength come off as more appropriate and deserved in my eyes, even a little comedic at times. But this story isn't just about some strong peasant boy chasing down a princess. No. Half the beauty of this manga comes from the team surrounding him, as well as a whole cast of characters inhabiting these strange and intriguing lands. So sit down, get comfy, and brace your weeb ass as we dive headfirst into a tower dungeon like no other. Whether you know him from Blam, Opossums, Knights of Sidonia, or even the Halo graphic novel, the name of Nihei Tsutomu carries weight among nerds across every corner of the internet, not just otakus. Many of his series have been adapted onto the silver screen, and even Marvel properties aren't clear of his influence. Now, I could sit here and talk for hours about all the wonderful things this man has made, but that's not what this video is about. Today's video is about Tsutomu's latest series, Tower Dungeon, which is currently being published in monthly shonen series. So the story kicks off in an unknown kingdom that we're not really told about, with one of the reigning princesses, Princess Ignalia, doing battle with her father, the king, or rather, the corpse of her father. You see, the king has been recently slain by an unknown sorcerer, a necromancer to be more specific, this parasitic fungus thing that emerges out of his body like some kind of a bloodborne boss. It's sick as fuck. The Lovecraftian and necrotic corpse of the king carries her off to the highest point in a nearby ruined fort and chants into the open air, commanding the ancient and mysterious Dragon's Tower to present itself and be known. And so, the tower ominously comes into view. And that's just the prologue, already hooking me with all this all hope is lost type stuff. It's fantastic. Anyway, after this really dope opening scene, we cut to the main protagonist of the story, Yuva, a peasant boy living with his grandparents and sister, located in a town not too far away from where this incident first took place, where the beginning incident takes place. Yuva is so close, in fact, that his village is called upon to conscript able-bodied men into the army. Dialogue with the townsfolk hints at how the fight in the prologue ended up going, which wasn't too great. After going about their limited options, the village settles up on Yuva going to join the army up at the old fort. It also helps that he has that typical shonen protagonist super strength. You'll love to see it. But don't worry, this attribute doesn't make him annoying like most culprits of this trait. He's more of a quiet guy, so it's not really that bad. After some heartfelt goodbyes, and the grandfather gifting Yuva his old helmet and shield, the lad takes his leave, and heads to the spot where the army will pick him up. Something cool I wanted to note is that on this walk to the pickup area, we get to see just how interesting and mysterious this kingdom is that we find ourselves in. Everything seems to be built into this massive wall that snakes through the land, and the architecture is very vertical with how it's designed. A lot of it also happens to be worn down with trees and shrubs sprouting out everywhere. The place feels very lived in, like there's a history behind it, none of which is explained to you. It's just little bits and pieces like this, these little bits of lore that are drip-fed to you, that makes me appreciate the manga a little bit more. So after getting picked up by the army, Yuva is then hauled back to the ruins of the prologue, where he's introduced to the Royal Guard Battalion, with only a handful of them surviving the previous raid. But immediately, they put the recruits to work by moving debris out of parts of the dilapidated fort, so it kinda sucks for the time being. Cut to the top of the tower now, and we're introduced to Redeem, a badass seasoned veteran, and Captain Mincerbell. Here, the two are arguing over whether or not to return to the tower in order to rescue the remaining troops stuck on the 50th floor. Although the captain has her reserves at first, she ends up giving in to Redeem's demands, allowing him to assemble a team to go after the soldiers. Due to Yuva's impressive strength, he's roped into being the pack mule for this expedition, being tasked with carrying 2 barrels full of salt. We'll get to that later. Here, Yuva meets Calyx and Eliquo, 2 other soldiers in the Royal Guard. After exchanging hellos and strapping the barrels nice and securely, the group sets off down the path to the Dragon's Tower. And as they approach, the fog begins to clear, and we finally see the true scope of what the tower is. This is the Dragon's Tower. This towering mass of pillars and stone that not only stretches well above the clouds, but up into space itself. Now that's some of the most Tsutomu shit I've ever seen. The thing is so big, it's almost silly. Look at how small the fort and mountains are in comparison. It's insane. But I digress. After using a wooden plank to sort of shimmy their way across, we finally get to see what the inside of this thing looks like. And let me tell you, it's pretty bleak. As per usual with your magical labyrinths, the place is chock full of dark and decrepit hallways, unidentified creatures that pile into corners, undead soldiers, and even armored gatemen waiting at the base of the 50th floor. The gatemen being these enormous, roughly 10 feet tall masked warriors, looking straight out of a Dark Souls game. Now again, although nothing is explicitly said, the environmental storytelling taking place on this trek through the tower raises some questions and answers others in the process. For starters, we can deduce that while in this tower, that if you die, your corpse will seemingly reanimate and wander around, hunting down other people in the tower. As for questions, the only thing that comes to mind is, why are there so many creatures in here that appear human, but are in fact very much not human? It piqued my interest. Like of all the things, they chose to take on the forms of humans. The undead guys just seem to be like people who have themselves stumbled into this tower however long ago. Regardless of this, the group cuts down the ironclad giant with ease, as they all attack the creature from different sides. Redeem's blade even breaks as he cleaves through the creature's body and armor. Unfortunately though, there's no time to celebrate, as just after the gateman falls, Calyx is shot in the chest with an arrow from an undead archer. Luckily for them, they have plenty of dragon spore to patch him up, a cure-all fungal drug that grows exclusively in the tower, hence the name. With Calyx recovering behind them, the group advances to the 50th floor to confront the beast holding on to these soldiers as food, the Chimus insect, or Chimus, however you pronounce this word right here. Now, unlike the name, the insect in this case is actually an enormous Lovecraftian mucus bug alien hybrid thing. That's the best way I can describe it. And when you see that all of its victims are glued to walls from said mucus for later consumption, it becomes apparent why the group brought salt in the first place. It seems that conventional warfare won't work against this thing, and they'll need to use the salt to essentially liquefy the creature. Not a bad plan, except for the fact that they're down one man, and Yuva ended up dropping one of the barrels during their climb up to this level, which means they have but a single shot at slaying this beast and saving everyone from being digested. This creature, of course, isn't your typical mindless monster. It's smart, it can think, and therefore Redeem devises a plan to distract the creature while Yuva makes for higher ground. Redeem removes the salt sack from the barrel and ties the empty barrel onto himself, effectively making himself the bait in the situation. One by one, the insect picks them off by gluing them to walls with its vile mucus shots. Even Redeem gets stuck before being able to draw out the creature fully to Yuva's position. Despite the gap though, our brave hero swallows his fears and makes the jump, slamming directly onto the insect's head. Fucking headshot with this one. Unfortunately though, the creature is still alive, somehow clinging to consciousness as its body is slowly dissolving into bubbles. With the insect unable to move and everyone else glued against the walls, Yuva must take his sword and plunge it into the beast's head, finishing it off for good. But just before Yuva can do this, the insect's back opens up and out pops the necromancer, princess in hand, bartering with him not to kill the creature. For some reason, he goes so far as to offer him stay in the tower, so long as he stops what he's doing. But Yuva ain't no bitch, and plunges the blade directly into the insect's head, causing it to evaporate into dust, leaving behind nothing but bones and this mysterious ball-looking thing. For some reason, after this is done, the necromancer offers Yuva the princess if he brings that very ball to the 100th floor of the tower, before just vanishing instantly. What this thing is, and why the necromancer wants it, for the time being, remains unknown. But he just dips out of there, leaving the group behind to recover the other soldiers and return them back to the fort. Though Rudim's mission was a complete success, the journey before Yuva has only just begun. And that's just the first chapter. It's insanely good right off the bat, being around 90 pages long, which is really fucking long for a first chapter in anything. Something I forgot to mention earlier was that one of the soldiers that Yuva saves happens to be Lillison, the fire mage, someone who becomes one of the main cast and a complete tsundere, albeit a very bodacious one at that. So far into the story, she's the only one in the royal battalion that uses magic, so getting her back benefits the group tremendously. Also, not to further spoil anything, but the story just keeps ramping up from here on out. Chapter 2 is even better than the first. I didn't even mention the Draco Metamorph bloodline, the parliamentary guard getting involved, the new reward for getting the princess, all the parties going after her, or the fact that Captain Mincerbell is a royal princess herself. Seriously, people, if you haven't read this thing, now is the perfect time to start. The biggest gripe I hear with this manga online is that the art style is drastically different than what we're used to with Tsutomu. And to those people, I say, shut the fuck up. Who cares what the art style looks like? Honestly, who cares? The drawings are still impressive, and this world truly does feel like something that's going to be fleshed out properly in the upcoming months or years to come. Everything from character and armor designs, to architecture, and all these gross-looking creatures is just so perfect. I love the tone, I love the story, and I'm checking for updates on this thing like a goddamn shark circling blood. I'm hooked, man. It sucks. Yet another masterclass series that will be drip-fed to us as we await proper volumes to be released. Although, you can forget about this thing coming out in English anytime soon. Tower Dungeon may be classified as a shonen, and yes, those tropes are definitely there, but this story definitely leans more towards the seinen side of things, with story, mystery, and brutality leading the charge for how this story is expressed. But yeah, that's everything I had to say about Tower Dungeon. I don't want to drag this video on too long. If you haven't checked out the manga yet, what are you doing? Go read this thing. Like, right now. Go read it.